Guys, there is one type of church. Actually, my message is towards all the churches who practice in one way or another about this tithe or tithing system. But there's one type of church which may think my message is irrelevant to them, but actually they are the ones who is really so cunning, I would say even more cunning than Joseph Prince, to trap and rob the poor. What type of church is that? It's those churches who say they don't really enforce the tithe or tithing system. These are the churches who just display a tithe envelope without pastors, leaders teaching or explaining the tithe. What is tithe? They just display the tithe envelope at the door of the church. This type, they are more guilty than cheating and tripping and robbing the poor. Let me explain. You display a tithe envelope at the door. Who will tithe? Let's examine. The pastor knows that the tithe is not biblical. So when his situation doesn't allow him to tithe, he will not tithe. Majority of the members, either they are able to tithe, so they tithe. But my guess is, majority of them, so-called mature Christians, those who have been Christians for many years, that they have seen enough, they have known enough to know that tithe is not compulsory. It's not a Christian teaching. So sometimes they tithe, sometimes they don't tithe. Now here comes a young believer, especially a poor young believer, being alone in this world. He had no hope before knowing Jesus Christ, and he came to this church. He heard about the name of Jesus, and he came to this church. He saw this tithe envelope. No one explained to him what is tithe, except to let him know that tithe means surrendering of 10% of her income to the church. Remember, we are doing the thought experiment. This poor soul, he just found her new religion in Jesus Christ, being left alone in the whole world, in a world without any hope, without any connection, without any support, without any friends, without any family. Now he come to this religion called Christianity. A sincere soul at this moment. Blessed be the soul, be such a soul. Let our soul be always like this poor soul, actually. A sincere, pure, innocent soul. So she came to this church and she saw the tithe envelope. She didn't know, and she doesn't care. Majority of the members don't really tithe. She also didn't even care whether the pastor is tithing. All she wants to do is, this is my God, this is my church, and tithe is part of my faith. I will do it because I have nothing to hold on in this world. Yeah, I have only 2 mites, but if God says, if my new faith says, but if Jesus Christ says, I need to tithe 10th of these 2 mites, I will tithe. I will tithe. 2 mites, mite being the smallest unit of money, let's suppose. And there's no way for her to break it down to smaller pieces. She will just give 1 piece. And on top of that, she heard that there's an offering. There's an offering, tithe and offering. So as I say, being a sincere, innocent, nonetheless naive and simple-minded poor widow that she is, she found her new religion. She tithed with her one mite. And now she found more peace, seemingly more peace in her soul. She also want to give. And she gave her the other mite. So guys, you see, I think this thought experiment clearly illustrates how this kind of church actually is so deadly to the poor widow, to the poor and young believer, to those people who have no hope in this world except in the church and in their God. This type of church don't trap those so-called mature or cunning Christians. I don't call these mature Christians cunning because majority of the Christians today, they don't really care about anyone else. They don't really care about how others are thinking about their practice, their teaching. They only care. They have their sweet home. They have their well-educated kids. Their finances are intact. They don't care a little bit, even a bit, about the conscience of the neighbors. You see, guys, I explained to you how such a church, I'm not touching on whether the tithe teaching is biblical or godly or right or wrong. I just illustrate to you how such a tithe, even simply displaying a tithe envelope at the doorstep, is trapping, cheating, robbing the very poor. The church needs help. If you see what I see, you must agree, and you should agree, that such churches are more guilty than Joseph Prince, because the pastors are playing a game. They are playing a game that, let's say it more bluntly. The mindset of these pastors is, this trap can trap some good money. Let's do it. But let's be safe. I don't want to be held responsible for trapping these people. I will not preaching on tithe. I will not ask for tithe, but nonetheless, I will display a tithe envelope at the doorstep. And the effect is, they really rob the poor so effectively. So effectively. Among all the members of the church, of that small church, displaying a tithe envelope at the doorstep, the rest all escaped in terms of financial harm. Only this poor widow tithed, without realizing tithe is not from God. Now the night came, she needs to feed her young. She needs to buy grocery for the family, and she has no money left. That's the situation she's in. Guys, I had been in those situations myself. I remember when I was a young believer, there were 1 or 2 weeks I lived with $2 every day by the tithe. I think for 1 or 2 weeks, I budget my last $20 to just eat one lunch on $2, the budget meal or something. Back then I had no complaint because I could do it. And I was reading the Bible like crazy even then. And there was one time I had no money for bus fare. I walked from Singapore Boonley MRT station to NTU. Well, it's not that hard because people jog or walk. But what I'm saying is now, naive believers can be put into such a situation. And there was one time When I came home, I realized the $100 I planned to put in the offering bag is still in my Bible. Then I realized, I didn't have money to buy meal, buy dinner. I remember that time I cried. I cried because I realized from that incident I kind of see that I kind of hear God. God was telling me it's not money I'm looking for. Yeah, those are some of the small incidences of my experiences. But I'm not trying to, asking you to pity me or hear my message because of my petty stories. I'm asking you hearers to consider how such a church, a small church, without proclaiming, without enforcing, without explaining the tithe or tithing thing, but just to display a tithe envelope at the doorstep, and how such churches are effectively cheating, trapping, and robbing only the poor widow. No one else is being trapped, only the poor widow. Guys, if you see what I see, please rethink the tithe, even a tithe envelope. This is so evil, This is like the pastor display a small flyer says, why sinners need God, or rather, why we are all sinners. But in his heart, he don't believe. He never believed such message. You display a tithe envelope, you never believe. This kind of person actually is, double-minded, double-faced. Being a pastor, being a leader is just a profession to them, to make a living. They're not true shepherd of God. These people, in the same way, when they display a flyer at the doorstep saying, Jesus is God, salvation is here, please accept, today's the day. When they display a tithe envelope, they have no issue in their conscience not believing yet displaying. So in the same way, they can display such flyers at the doorstep, but in their heart, they never really believe. To them, it's not relevant, because what they care is people come to church. What they care is people are giving money to the church. They don't care about the truth. They don't care about how the message is affecting the members. They only care people come to church, listen to them, sit in the services, go through the motion, and get the money. Yeah, that's what they care. They don't care about the truth. They don't care about you guys. But God cares. And those who care about the truth cares. Guys, do you hear me? This kind of church have no excuse, and my message is directed to such churches also. They have no excuse. Time is short. Hard landing is approaching. Repent. Rethink your position regarding tithe, regarding robbing the poor, helping the poor. Repent before it's too late. Thank you for listening.